The lobby is silent, not the kind of quiet you get before a bank closes, but the tense, breathless kind you feel right before something explodes. Every eye in the room is locked on the glass double doors. Through them, you can see the black SUVs pulling up, two of them, black-tinted windows rolling down just enough for the glint of badges to catch the afternoon sun. Inside, a black woman in a navy blue blazer sits in a chair near the teller counters, her wrists free, but her dignity under siege. Moments ago, the bank manager had stepped out from behind the counter, eyes cold, voice sharp. "Ma'am, the FBI is on their way. Please don't make this harder than it has to be." No one knew exactly what she'd done. Rumors whispered. Through the line, fraud, money laundering, maybe identity theft. The manager's face was tight with certainty. This was his moment to handle the situation. The doors swing open. Two federal agents step in, the room holding its collective breath. They walk right past the manager, ignoring his outstretched hand. Their eyes are locked on the woman. "Ma'am," one of them says, his voice steady but loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's an honor." And then they salute her. Right there, in front of the stunned customers, the frozen tellers, and the pale-faced manager who can't seem to close his mouth. Phones start recording. Nobody knows why this just happened. But one thing is clear. Everything the manager thought he knew about this woman is about to come crashing down. Before the FBI SUVs, before the whispers and the shock, she was just Dr. Althea Carter. A 38-year-old financial consultant and decorated Air Force veteran, Althea lived a quiet, deliberate life in Arlington, Virginia. Her townhouse sat on a corner lot, American flag waving in the breeze, a tiny vegetable garden tucked along the fence line. Every weekday morning, she followed the same routine. Up before dawn, coffee brewed strong, 30 minutes on the treadmill, and a quick skim of both the Washington Post and the Air Force Times. Old habits from her military days never quite faded, especially her insistence on being prepared for anything. Neighbors knew her as polite but private. She'd wave when walking her rescue dog, Murphy, but rarely lingered for small talk. It wasn't arrogance, it was focus. She'd spent years advising high-profile clients on investments and asset protection, which meant confidentiality wasn't just part of her job, it was her instinct. On this particular Friday, her morning had been unusually hectic. A last-minute email from a nonprofit she advised mentioned urgent funding issues. They needed her to process a large wire transfer immediately to keep a veterans' housing project alive. The nonprofit's bank account was with a branch downtown, a branch Althea didn't normally visit. But the organization's treasurer assured her it would be faster if she came in person with the paperwork. By 10:45 a.m., she was pulling into the bank's parking lot. It was one of those older buildings with heavy brass handles on the glass, doors, marble floors inside, and a faint smell of lemon polish. She joined the short line, holding a folder with the transfer documents. The teller she approached, a young woman with kind eyes, took one look at the sum and hesitated. One moment, please." She disappeared toward the back. Minutes later, the branch manager appeared. Mid-50s, stiff suit, the kind of man who still wore cufflinks to work. His eyes flicked from the folder to Althea's face, lingering a little too long. "What's the source of these funds?" he asked, his tone polite enough to pass for professional, if you ignored the edge beneath it. "They belong to the Veterans Legacy Project," Althea replied calmly, sliding over her ID and the nonprofit's credentials. But the manager's expression didn't soften. If anything, it sharpened. "Can you wait here?" he asked, though it sounded more like an order. Within minutes, she realized he wasn't just verifying paperwork. He was on the phone, his voice low but urgent. She caught fragments. Possible fraud, large sum, suspicious activity, FBI contact. And then he hung up, walked toward her, and said the words that would change everything. "Ma'am, The FBI will be here shortly. The moment the manager announced, "The FBI will be here shortly," the air in the bank shifted. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the quiet hum of the printers seemed to fade. Althea sat perfectly still, the same calm composure she'd learned to maintain during deployments in Afghanistan and classified operations overseas. If there was one thing the military had taught her, it was that panic never solved anything. But inside, she felt the heat rising. This wasn't a minor inconvenience. This was a public humiliation. She could see the curious stares from the customers, still waiting in line, feel the silent judgment pressing in. The manager paced a few feet away, occasionally glancing at her like he'd just caught a criminal in the act. He leaned toward the head teller and whispered something, both of them cutting their eyes toward her before quickly looking away. Her phone buzzed. It was the treasurer from the Veterans Legacy Project, Mr. Howard. "Althea? Is everything okay? The bank called me, saying there was some issue." She lowered her voice. "They've contacted the FBI. I'm still not sure why." There was a pause on the other end, followed by disbelief. "The FBI? For a legitimate non-profit transfer? That's insane." Althea's gaze drifted back to the manager, whose jaw was set like stone. "Howard," she said quietly, "don't come down here yet. Let me handle this." Across the lobby, two teenage boys sat near the window, phones out, already recording. They weren't discreet about it either. One of them whispered to the other, "Dude, this is gonna blow up on TikTok. FBI arresting some lady at the bank, instant views." Althea caught the words but didn't react. She had no intention of giving them the drama they wanted. She mentally ran through the likely sequence of events. Agents would arrive, ask questions, review the paperwork, realize there was no criminal activity, and leave. Simple. But the problem wasn't just the investigation. It was the damage already being done to her reputation. She could almost hear her father's voice in her head, the way he used to warn her. "Once people think you're guilty, Althea, proving you're innocent doesn't erase what they've already decided." The minutes dragged on. At exactly 11:12 a.m., the faint rumble of engines echoed outside. Customers near the window straightened in their seats. The teenage boys scrambled to get better camera angles. Two black SUVs rolled into the parking lot. The bank manager's chest swelled like he was about to be congratulated for his heroic instincts. "Everyone, please stay calm," he announced, to the lobby, as though anyone had been making noise. The tellers exchanged glances, half curious, half uneasy. Althea noticed one of them, the young woman who'd first helped her, biting her lip as though she wanted to speak but didn't dare. The glass doors opened, and two federal agents walked in. One tall with close-cropped hair, the other slightly shorter but with a posture that radiated authority. The manager stepped forward eagerly, extending his hand. "Agents, thank you for coming so quickly. The suspect—" The taller agent brushed past him without a word. His eyes locked on Althea. The shorter agent's gaze followed, and the corner of his mouth lifted almost imperceptibly. He stopped in front of her chair. "Dr. Carter?" "Yes," she replied evenly. Then, to the manager's visible confusion, the agent snapped to attention, heels together, spine straight, and raised his hand in a crisp military salute. The taller agent did the same. The room went dead silent, except for the faint, incredulous gasp from someone near the counter. "Ma'am," the shorter agent said, his voice carrying through the stunned lobby, "it's an honor to meet you again." Phones were now filming, openly. This was no longer just a local embarrassment. It was going to be on the internet before lunchtime. The manager stammered, I don't understand. She's here for—" The taller agent turned to him sharply. "Sir, this woman is a retired U.S. Air Force lieutenant colonel, Bronze Star recipient, and former intelligence officer. She's responsible for saving the lives of more than a dozen American service members during a 2012 operation in Kandahar. You should be thanking her, not detaining her. Murmurs rippled through the bank. The teenage boys recording, actually, lowered their phones, realizing they'd misread the situation entirely. Althea remained composed, though inside, she could feel the mix of vindication and exhaustion churning. The shorter agent looked back at her. "Dr. Carter, would you like us to escort you out?" She glanced at the room full of watching faces. "No," she said. "I came here to finish a transfer for the Veterans Legacy Project. I want to do that, if it's not too much trouble." The words hung in the air, a quiet but unmistakable rebuke. The lobby was still buzzing from the agent's salute when the manager's face flushed a deep shade of red. He tried to recover his composure, smoothing down his tie. "Well, I was just doing my job, following protocol." Althea stood, gathering her documents. "Your protocol seems selective," she said evenly, her voice just loud enough for those nearby to hear. The taller agent's jaw tightened. "Selective. That's one word for it." The younger teller, the one who had first helped Althea, finally spoke up. "Sir, I told you the documents checked out, but you said—" Her voice trailed off when the manager shot her a warning glare. The shorter agent turned to the manager. "Sir, for the record, initiating a federal law enforcement response without sufficient probable cause is not only wasteful, it can be considered harassment, especially when it targets someone who's clearly presented legal identification and documentation." The manager shifted uncomfortably. "There have been scams involving nonprofits. You can't be too careful." Althea's eyes narrowed. "So you assume that because the person making the transfer was a black woman with a large sum of money, she was the scam?" The silence was sharp. Several customers exchanged uneasy glances. One older man near the door muttered, "Shameful." The agents remained on either side of Althea as she stepped back toward the counter. The teller quickly processed the transfer, her hands moving faster than they had all morning. When she handed Althea the receipt, she said quietly, "I'm sorry for how this happened." Althea gave her a small nod. "Thank you." The agents walked her toward the door, but before leaving, the shorter one paused, turning back toward the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, you're looking at a woman who's given more for this country than most of us will ever be asked to. Remember that the next time you make snap judgments." Phones went up again, catching his words. The clip was already being stitched into the earlier salute footage. Outside, the summer air was heavy with humidity. The agents walked her to her car, keeping their voices low. "We're sorry you had to go through that," the taller one said. "But you should know this is going to get attention. The video's already online." Althea exhaled slowly. "I figured as much." The shorter agent gave a faint smile. "The truth has a way of spreading, too. People are going to see the salute before they see the accusation." She thanked them and got into her car, but before starting the engine, she checked her phone. Hundreds of notifications were already coming in. Tags from strangers, messages from fellow veterans, even a few reporters asking for comment. The top trending clip on social media showed the exact moment the agents saluted her, overlaid with the caption, "Bank tries to have her arrested. FBI salutes instead." By the time she got home that afternoon, the story had taken on a life of its own. Neighbors stopped her on the sidewalk, asking if it was really her in the video. Former Air Force colleagues called to tell her she'd just become an unofficial symbol of dignity under fire. But the attention wasn't all positive. Her work email was flooded with hate mail accusing her of playing the race card, along with threats from anonymous accounts. She'd been in the public eye before, military, commendations, veterans panels. But this was different. This was viral outrage, and the internet didn't care about context. That evening, she received a call from Howard, the Veterans Legacy Project treasurer. Althea, I've spoken to the board. We want to make a statement, not just about what happened to you, but about what this says about how veterans, especially women of color, are treated when they're out of uniform. Althea hesitated. Speaking out meant magnifying the story, but staying silent meant letting the narrative be shaped by others, especially the ones who saw her as a threat, not a hero. I'll think about it, she said. But if we do this, it's going to be on my terms. Meanwhile, inside the bank, the fallout had already begun. The younger teller quietly told other staff what really happened, that the manager ignored verification, skipped standard procedures, and called in a federal escalation without evidence. Customers who'd witnessed the salute were posting their own versions of events. Some demanded the bank issue a public apology. Others hinted they'd be closing their accounts. By nightfall, the branch's Google reviews were flooded with one-star ratings, most citing racial bias and humiliating a veteran. And the manager? He wasn't giving interviews, but insiders knew he'd been called into an emergency meeting with regional leadership. By Saturday morning, the clip had crossed 3 million views on TikTok and was spreading across Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. News headlines started appearing. FBI salutes black woman in bank after manager calls for arrest. From suspect to hero, viral video sparks debate on racial profiling. Cable networks ran the footage on a loop, cutting between the salute and still frames of the stunned bank manager. Commentators began weighing in, some praising Althea's composure, others calling for the manager's termination. But what surprised Althea most was the flood of support from other veterans. Her inbox overflowed with messages. "Ma'am, I served in the 82nd Airborne. What you went through was wrong. We stand with you. As a Navy vet and a black woman, I've been in similar situations. Thank you for not letting them break you." There were hundreds more, stories of quiet discrimination, moments where service records meant nothing in the face of assumptions. Late that afternoon, a producer from a major morning news show called. "We'd like to have you on Monday to tell your side," she said. Althea paused. "You want the headline or the truth?" "The truth," the producer replied. "And the salute. America needs to see that moment in context." She agreed, on one condition. Howard, from the Veterans Legacy Project, would be there with her to speak about the nonprofit and the funding that started it all. Meanwhile, inside the bank's regional office, the situation was spiraling. Manager had been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. Corporate PR was drafting a carefully worded statement about unfortunate misunderstandings and commitment to diversity. But on social media, damage control wasn't working. A customer who'd been in the lobby that day posted a detailed account. The teller confirmed her paperwork. The manager ignored it. He called the FBI without even asking for additional proof. Then they came in and saluted her. "I've never seen someone's arrogance crumble so fast." That post alone got over 50,000 shares in 24 hours. Sunday evening, Althea met with Howard in his office to prepare for the interview. Howard, a former Marine with a booming voice and a quick laugh, had known her for years. He was furious, not just about the personal attack, but about what it implied for every veteran of color who walked into a bank, a store, or an office. "Althea," he said, leaning forward, "this isn't just about you. This is about what people think they see when they see us, about who they think we are before they know our names, before they know our service." She nodded slowly. "Then we make it about more than one bank branch. We make it about the pattern." Howard smiled. "Now you're talking." By the time Monday's interview aired, the country was already leaning in. The hosts replayed the salute, then let Althea tell her story without interruption. She explained the nonprofit, the urgent funding, the lack of proper verification, and the decision to escalate without cause. Howard followed with statistics, how veterans of color were more likely to face financial scrutiny, loan denials, and criminal suspicion, even when their paperwork was in order. It wasn't an angry interview. It was controlled, factual, but laced with the kind of moral authority that made viewers stop scrolling and listen. When it ended, the hosts shook their heads. "Thank you for your service, both in uniform and now." That night, donations to the Veterans Legacy Project tripled. Messages poured in from other nonprofits asking for partnerships, but the attention had another effect. More veterans, especially women and people of color, began sharing their own stories of being profiled in public spaces. A hashtag began trending. Salute her too. Althea hadn't planned on starting a movement, but it was already happening. By Thursday, the pressure on the bank had reached a breaking point. Their statement, a bland paragraph about valuing all customers equally, was being mocked online as tone-deaf. 3 major veteran organizations had issued open letters demanding a direct apology to Dr. Althea Carter and a review of racial bias policies. And then came the call. It was from the bank's corporate headquarters. The voice on the other end was clipped and formal. "Dr. Carter, our CEO would like to meet with you in person to address this situation and make amends." Althea hesitated. "Is this about protecting your brand or correcting an injustice?" The voice faltered. "Both, I suppose. But he is prepared to meet wherever and whenever you choose." She chose the same branch where it had happened. Friday morning, the air was thick with anticipation. Word had spread that the CEO himself was coming. Reporters and camera crews gathered outside. Inside, the lobby had been cleared except for a few chairs and a long table. Althea arrived in the same navy blue blazer she'd worn that day, this time by choice as a quiet reminder. Howard was by her side, along with representatives from 2 veterans organizations. When the CEO entered, a tall man in his 60s with a silver tie and guarded eyes, he extended his hand. "Dr. Carter, I want to begin by saying how deeply sorry we are for what you experienced. What happened here was unacceptable." She shook his hand but didn't smile. "It wasn't just unacceptable. It was preventable. Your manager skipped verification, ignored your own policies, and decided that a black woman with a large transaction must be suspicious. That's not a mistake. That's bias." The CEO nodded slowly, aware that cameras were capturing every word. "I won't dispute that. We've launched an internal investigation, and the manager in question is no longer with the company." Howard's voice cut in. "That's a start, but this isn't about one man. It's about the systems that let this happen. What are you going to change?" The CEO straightened. "Effective immediately, we are implementing mandatory bias and cultural competency training for all employees. We're also establishing a special liaison program for veteran customers to ensure they are treated with the respect they've earned." It was a carefully crafted answer, but it wasn't enough for Althea. She took a slow breath, then leaned forward. "And what about the damage? The public humiliation? The fact that for 20 minutes I was treated as a criminal in front of strangers before your own employees, only to be vindicated because the FBI recognized my service?" The CEO hesitated. "We are prepared to donate to the Veterans Legacy Project in your name." A murmur rippled through the room. Althea's eyes locked on him. "Then, make it public. Match every donation the organization receives for the next 90 days, dollar for dollar. And make the announcement right now while these cameras are here." The CEO blinked, clearly not expecting the demand. But with reporters watching, he had no choice. "Consider it done." Howard's grin was slow but wide. "That'll do for a start." The reporters swarmed, asking questions, snapping photos. But the moment that stole the headlines came when, as the meeting wrapped, 2 of the same FBI agents from that day walked into the lobby, invited by Howard without telling Althea. They approached her, smiled, and once again, in front of the press, raised their hands in a salute. The flash of cameras turned the moment into an image that would dominate the weekend news cycle. For the first time since the ordeal began, Althea allowed herself a real smile. Not because the bank had finally bent to public pressure, not because the donations would now skyrocket, but because the narrative had shifted. She was no longer the woman the bank called the FBI on. She was the veteran they saluted twice. And in that transformation, there was power. And so, the story that began with humiliation ended with the ultimate reversal. Respect. But think about it. How many other black women, men, and children don't get this ending? How many never get the salute? Only the suspicion? In that bank, one person's bias could have destroyed a life. Instead, it got flipped. Not because the system worked perfectly, but because this time, her truth came to light in time. For every story like hers, there are countless others where dignity is stripped away without witnesses, where reputations are ruined before the facts are even checked. That should haunt us. That should anger us. So, what would you do if you saw something like this unfold in real life? Would you step in? Would you question the assumptions? Because justice doesn't just happen. It's built, piece by piece, by people who refuse to stay silent. This is Justice Tales. And if you believe that respect should never be earned through humiliation, then share this story. And tell me, if you were in that bank, in that moment, would you have been part of the problem or part of the change? What's your answer, America?